Okay, so we're starting something new here today on Mobile Club Maker. We are going to be reviewing golf clubs. I've got this TaylorMade M5 460 driver. We're going to review it, but we're going to do it a little bit differently. Let's go. Hi everyone, it's AJ, the Mobile Club Maker. Thanks for watching this video. As always, if you enjoy it, please like it, share it, or subscribe to our channel. So today we're going to be starting something new. This is going to be a new series that we do, basically doing golf club reviews. But we're going to be doing them a little bit differently. You know, there's a lot of reviews out there, either written or videos online on YouTube or other places where someone goes out and hits a new driver on the range or goes on a launch monitor and hits it on a GC quad or a TrackMan, gives you a bunch of numbers, and you know, you can take that for what it's worth. It may or may not be applicable to your particular game, but that's what's out there. I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to basically see, you know, how consistent are these drivers. I'm wondering if I pick up one of these drivers in the hitting bay of a retailer, is it going to be the same as the driver that I pick up off the rack? Or if I go to a demo day, is that driver going to be the same as the one I order online? Easiest way I could think of doing that was to take some spec measurements. Basically look at some different attributes of the golf club and compare them and see how close they are to each other. This first video, like I said, we're going to be talking about this TaylorMade M5 460 driver. But we're not just going to check the specs on this driver. No, I've got 5 of them. That's right, I went out and I found 5 identical M5 drivers. They're all the same loft. They've all got the same stock shaft, which is the hazardous smoke, in a stiff flex, same weight. Basically took them, picked them off the rack, just like any driver you could go into a store and buy. They should be basically identical. But we wanted to see, well, how close are they? You know, there's always some wiggle room. There's always tolerances that the manufacturers adhere to. So the lofts may be a little bit high or low, or the weights may be a little bit high or low. Shafts may be a little bit different. I wanted to see how close are they. And I thought, well, just picking one sample, that's not going to get you anywhere, because it could be a one-off. That doesn't really tell you where it gauges against other clubs. I figure 5, that seems like a reasonable sample if they're all supposed to be the same. That allows me to do 2 different things. One, I can compare each of these drivers to each of the other drivers that are all supposedly the same. From there, then we can take those measurements and compare them against other drivers, either other drivers within a same brand or other drivers within a different brand. Basically just see, you know, how consistent is the product? Is the driver that you pick up off the rack the same as a different driver that you pick up off the rack if it has the same specs? Is that hitting bay demo club that says 9-degree stiff going to be the same as the 9-degree stiff that you pick up off the rack? So that's what I wanted to look at today. What we're going to use to do that, we've got a few different pieces of equipment. First off, we've got a loft lie gauge here. I really like this machine. It is very thorough, it is very simple to use, and it gives very detailed measurements of loft and lie. We're also going to weigh all the heads. Basically, we're going to take the heads off the shafts since they've all got the adjustable hosels. We can take the heads off. We're going to weigh all the heads just to see how they compare. After that, we're also going to measure out the shafts, basically for stiffness, for consistency. You know, graphite shafts, really any shafts, just like anything, there can be little variations in them. And really, one of the most important things with any graphite shaft, is that it's consistently round. And what do I mean by that is when you flex it in one direction, does it flex the same as if you flex it in another direction? You may hear people talk about spines or puring or flowing. These are all different ways of measuring basically how the shaft in different orientations flexes. Ideally, you want something that is very consistent. That being, it flexes the same whether it is, the logo is facing up and down, the logo is facing pointing at your target line, or the logo is facing in some angle between those two. That's what you're really working for. That's the best case scenario, and I think probably one of the most important things when you're picking out a shaft. So I want to go ahead and measure basically the radial consistencies of these shafts. Since we have the clubs here, might as well do that too, and compare them and just see how they compare both in flex and radial consistency to each other and individually. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you basically the process of what I did to measure these one time. I've gone ahead and actually measured all these already because it's not very exciting to watch me do it, but I will show you how I did it at least one time just so you know the process, what we're doing. And then we will come back, talk about the results, which is probably, that's the most important part. So here we go. This is the gauge, like I said. First step is going to be locking the shaft into the shaft clamp. So we start out, lock it in there, not too tight. Keep it a little bit loose so we can make adjustments as we go. Basically, want to get it sitting just above the base plate. I've got this little piece of cardboard here with some furniture pads on it. It's about, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch thick. I use that just to sort of make sure I'm keeping every one of these clubs at the same height off the base plate. Again, trying to be as consistent as possible for the measurements we take. So we'll go ahead, put this in here. That seems to be relatively square face. We're going to go ahead and take a look and see if it's sitting at the right height off the base. And it is just barely above the pads. We're going to drop it just a touch, so it's just making contact with that. Okay, now that's there. Now we will go ahead and take a measurement of the face angle and make an adjustment need be so that we have a face angle of 0, that being a completely square face like it would be when you set up to hit it. So right about there, we'll go ahead and lock that down now. All right, from here we can go and take our lie measurement, that being our lie angle. You can do that a few different ways. You can sort of look at the base of the club as it sits on the base of the gauge and find the center spot there. You can use the crown also using the scoring lines on the face to sort of get them parallel to the base plate. That should give you basically a pretty much square face as far as sitting nice and flat, assuming that those lines are on there correctly, and they usually are. So we will go take a measurement here, see how that looks. If you needed to make an adjustment, we would adjust right here, up or down, bringing the shaft up or down, changing the lie angle. This is actually where it should be because I've already had it set, so I know that this is the lie angle for this club. From there, we will then go and we can take our loft measurement. Again, we'll check the face angle, make sure the face angle is at 0, which it is on this little readout right here, and then come over here and measure what the loft of this club is right there. And that's how we get loft and lie. I also just wanted to show you how we do the radial consistency check on these shafts. Like I said, what we're basically trying to do is see how they flex in different planes and see if there are different stiffnesses within the same shaft. There's always going to be a little bit because of how shafts are manufactured and how there are layers and layers of carbon fiber putting them together. It's basically the goal to get them as consistent as possible. So regardless of which way the shaft is oriented, whether it is logo up, logo down, logo on the side, you get a consistent flex. So basically we've locked this into our frequency meter. This is just a vise on this end, locks the shaft in, and on this end is the meter, which measures how many times the shaft passes between these two sensors in a given period of time gives you a number. The higher that number is, the stiffer the shaft is. Again, what we did here, we took 6 measurements starting at what I called 0, which is a perpendicular toe up. Measured this, then we measure it again at 30 degrees, at 60 degrees, at 90 degrees, at 120 degrees, and at 150 degrees. We take all those measurements and we see how close they are to each other. Basically, the way we would do that, we pull down the shaft a little bit, we let it go, we hit the button, we get a number on the screen. If the number comes out seeming a little bit high or low for some reason from what we think it should be, I'll go ahead and take a few measurements. Then we would go rotate it 30 degrees. Say something like this. Again, this is just for example, trying to do this quickly. Tighten it back down, take another measurement, see what we get. No, that one didn't. Again. There we go. Sometimes the shaft is going to want to wobble a little bit depending on how you release it, so you just have to try sometimes and do a couple releases to make sure you get consistent, again, consistent data. So that's how that works. Okay, so just a note about what we did here. I have measured all of these clubs from a 0 face angle. There will be other schools of thought saying that you should measure them based off of their playing face angle, that being how the club naturally wants to sit, how it either falls open or falls closed. However, I felt like to try and get as accurate as I could as far as the measurements, I wanted to take out as many variables as possible. So that meant setting it completely square every time with a 0 face angle versus trying to manipulate the head to where I think it would naturally want to sit and try and measure it off that. The fact of the matter is, most golfers are going to play the club, regardless of what club it is, basically through the bag with a square face. That being, they're going to point the face of the club at their target. They're not usually going to be playing it open or closed. I know there are some, but in general, I would say most golfers are going to try and aim the face at the target. So I think it just makes sense to try and measure it in that position. So there is a 0 face angle. That being said, certain drivers are going to sit either a little open or a little closed. That's based on basically how the shaft or how the hosel is aligned into the head. You can adjust how the face opens or closes. If you want the head to close a little bit, well then you set the hosel basically so that the shaft is pointing towards the target. That being the grip side would be slightly closer to the target. What happens then if you then return the shaft to a complete perpendicular position to the ground, the head will want to fall slightly closed. Vice versa, if you want the head to play slightly open, fall open a little bit, you set it where the shaft is leaning away from your target, that being the grip is further away than the tip of the shaft to your target. When you do that and you bring it back up to that perpendicular position to the ground, what happens is the head will want to fall slightly open. If you keep it completely square, it should sit completely square. So the manufacturers can adjust that as they see fit based on the type of golfer that they're trying to design the club for. I'm not going to go ahead and measure that. I don't find that to be a very useful measurement because, like I said, again, one, I think most people are going to be playing the club in a neutral, square, aimed at the target face angle. And if they're not, who's to say what they're playing at is what the club is made for. The club may sit 1.5 degrees closed, but they may be playing at 2.5 degrees closed, or vice versa with a fade. All of those changes will change the loft. So again, to try and keep everything as consistent as possible, I went ahead, did 0 face angle on everything across the board, keep it simple. So here's the results. Like I said, we had 5 different drivers that we got. I got these drivers from different locations. I didn't just get them all from one spot to try and make sure there wouldn't be any sort of, grouping with results. All of them TaylorMade M5 drivers, 460 cc's, 9-degree lofts with the Project X hazardous smoke shaft in a stiff flex. Basically, all of them should be identical. So here's what we found. First off, as far as loft goes, I have to say the lofts on these, well, let me start with lie. Lie angle was extremely consistent. I measured all 5 of these drivers and they all came out right at the same 58-degree lie angle, spot on. So that was very impressive. They were all right where they were supposed to be. The lofts, again, I was very impressed with. Between the 5 drivers, there was no more than a half-degree difference. In the 5 drivers that I measured, the lowest loft was right at that 9-degree mark, and the highest loft was at 9.5. One at 9 degree, one at 9.2, 2 of them at 9.3, and 1 of them at 9.5, all within half a degree. That I thought was really impressive. Coming into this, I was expecting, I was kind of giving the manufacturer sort of a 1-degree wiggle room one way or the other, so that you might find one 9-degree that's actually 8, and you might find one 9-degree that's actually 10, so that's 2 degrees difference, which is pretty substantial. But these, at least with these 5 drivers, they were all within that 0.5 degree difference. Very impressive. I also went ahead, just because I had these drivers here, I had the machines here, I went ahead and I adjusted the hosels. I set them for what they have as their 2 degrees increased loft and their 2 degrees decreased loft, just to measure those. I'll put those up here on the screen too, just so you can see what those came out to be. Again, they were pretty darn consistent. The head weights, we measured all the head weights, that being just the heads without the adapter included, so just the head. Every one of the 5 was exactly the same weight. They all weighed 197 grams. Finally, talking about the shafts, we went ahead, like I said, and we measured all the shafts, trying to see how they differed hard side to soft side, see if there was any dominant spine, if you want to say, that thicker section on the shaft that would make it stiffer versus a softer side, which can influence how consistent the shaft is. I have to say, again, overall, I was very impressed with this Project X hazardous smoke shaft. None of these drivers had more than 3 cycles difference between their hard side and their soft side. That is very, very impressive. Just to give you sort of a range, figure 10 cycles, if you were between 250 and 260, that would be considered a flex. That would be the difference between, say, regular and stiff, or stiff and extra stiff. All of these were within 3, so that is basically a third of a flex. I have always felt that if you are under 2% variation, you're doing pretty well. And these were all right around 1% only. Very impressive. They were all very consistent. Beyond that, also measuring them one against the next, they were also very consistent. Across all 5, it was only 8 cycles. Again, I thought that was very impressive. So there you go. We've now measured these M5 drivers, 5 different drivers, and I have to say I was very impressed with how consistent they really were. The lofts were very consistent, the lie was extremely consistent, the weight was extremely consistent, and also these Project X hazardous shafts were very consistent, both individually, hard side to soft side, and one against the next, comparing all 5 of them. So I thought these clubs were all very impressive. Now, these are all expensive drivers. These are $550 retail drivers. So you would hope that they are consistent in how they're made and how they play. And I have to say, looking at the results here, that I think they are. And the quality is definitely there. You get what you pay for. It is a quality product, at least in terms of how consistent the club heads and the shafts were, at least as far as what we measured here. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative. Like I said, I haven't seen anything like this online before, so I thought this would be something neat and something a little bit different to let you see and think about. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it, or subscribe to the channel. Look forward to seeing you next time. Keep it in the short grass.